got mine too.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Ross. I'm a professor here at Penn State Law and the executive director of the new Center for the Study of Sports and Society that the university created about a year ago. Delighted to have you here for our inaugural Football Friday, intended to let you have an excuse to get into full-throated game gear, having done your intellectual part at the beginning. We have a great program, but I will introduce our panel. But first, for some welcoming words, I'm very delighted to have all of you meet the dynamic and exciting new dean of Penn State Law and our School of International Affairs, Scott Radecic.
Good afternoon. Come on, you can do better than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. So thank you for that warm welcome, Steve. And I just want to thank the tireless work that Steve Ross and the co-organizers of this center have really done in building this exciting collaboration. I also wanted to give a shout out to some of our staff here who have been supporting this event today, including Wyatt DuBois, Darren Brodish, and Joe Wesley. So I can't tell you how excited I am to have Penn State Law participating in the Center for the Study of Sports and Society. To me, this embodies exactly the kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that is going to help us build the next great public law school here and also really contribute to society and build the kinds of partnerships that we can build at a research university like Penn State. The center now, after the wonderful work of its organizers, has support from 8 deans, the athletics department, and the provost. So this truly is an effort across this university to think about these important issues. I also can't help but give a special shout out to Sandy Barber, who I'm delighted to see here. I have been so grateful for the warm welcome that you've given me to Penn State, Sandy. And in particular, I'm really excited about the new ways in which we're building partnerships between Penn State Law and the School of International Affairs and Athletics, from our students helping with legal issues to thinking about how do we create pipelines of opportunity to law school and to the School of International Affairs. Before I turn it back to Steve to introduce the panel, because I'm not the person you want to be hearing from today, I just want to say that I am so excited to have Scott Radecic and John Affleck here to talk about the future of sports stadiums. This topic illustrates to me exactly why we need this center and exactly the kind of interdisciplinary collaboration that we're building in this space in Penn State. So, there's a need for those who are making the laws, like federal tax law, the regulation of interstate commerce, local planning decisions that are important here. It's important for those people to have some understanding of architecture and urban planning. And similarly, it's crucial for the architects to understand business needs and the legal environment in order to design great stadiums. And so we're really lucky to have this sort of intellectual feast before we go beat Nebraska tomorrow. So with that, oh yeah, I'm going to turn it back to Steve to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Ari. One of the things that I've learned as we're building this center is what it takes to actually do a first-class operation. I want to personally thank Kirk Deal from Athletics and Mike Torman from the Belisario School of Communication. These are real pros. To me, this is like pickup basketball and an NBA star comes in. And so I really wanted to appreciate that. And thanks so much for Scott for agreeing to be our inaugural guest here. He's brought in a great crowd. I'm delighted for that. And we hope to build on this. Just your experience here has allowed the center and the law school to develop contacts which we didn't know existed with the School of Arts and Architecture about these sorts of issues, and to tie in with people on business and real estate and all these other things. So just your agreeing to do this has been a success. Now I will turn it over to a very good friend of mine and a key member of our center and partner in the center, Professor John Affleck. He directs the Curley Center for Sports Journalism in Belisario, and unlike me, is an actual professional at interviewing. So I hope that the Q&A session with questions to follow will make it worth your while, and you'll be back next fall when hopefully we can have the second of an annual Football Friday experience. Thank you very much.
Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. I just want to say a few words about Scott. Since we have such a large crowd, I'm figuring that we have sort of a wide range of familiarity with the issues going on and Scott's career. And so I just wanted to tell you a little bit about him. What you probably know is he was an All-American linebacker at Penn State and a member of our 1982 National Championship team. And for research today, the best part of my research was I watched a good chunk of the Sugar Bowl against Georgia, which was he went on to an 11-year career in the NFL with the Chiefs, Bills, and Colts, if I've got that right, and became the founding principal, senior founding principal of Populus, what's now known as Populus, the first architecture firm really truly dedicated to sports stadiums and arenas around the world. So he's a great guy to talk about the future of going to games, what that's going to feel like, and where we are now. So, welcome, Scott.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
I thought we just sort of started off to kind of just try to frame it for people. And I'm going to start with a few questions for Scott, but then if people start to want to join in the dialogue, just raise your hand and we'll have it, or just come on up.
It's being recorded.
Yeah, and it's being recorded. So, so why don't you come on up and feel free to just get in line. I'll call on you as I see you come up. But Scott, we've seen a lot of changes to stadiums over the years, and you know, just for instance, I don't want to date you, but the Beaver Stadium that you played in had a sellout attendance of just shy of 85,000, and you know, this year we set a record at close to 111,000 for the Michigan game. I'm sure we'll have a big crowd tomorrow. You know, we're actually at a point where, my understanding, looking at some of the other stadiums that have gone through renovations fairly recently, particularly at the college level, have come down a little bit. And there was a quote from Ohio State's athletic director not that long ago that we've reached the point where it's not just about how many bodies you can fit in the seats, but a little bit more about the experience. So I was wondering if you could just sort of frame for us where we are in terms of what you think about when you think about
Sure. Yeah, I remember that first game as a freshman, you know, 83,000 people in the stands. You never thought you'd be in a building that had more people than that in it. And you've seen what Beaver Stadium's done over the years, 107,000. But you know, for those of us in the world of sports architecture, the way people experience a football game or a sporting event today is a little bit different than the way we used to do that 20 or 30 years ago. And you know, the paradigm was, for those of us who are Gen Xers or even the generation before us, is we were happy to come and sit in the seat and watch the game for the whole time. And occasionally you get up and go to the bathroom and maybe get a hot dog and get back to your seat. But you know, as society continues to change, people want to experience these events in different ways. And today's young people especially are looking to incorporate technology in different ways than we used to. I know it's a really big challenge for a lot of places is to bring in the DAS and to bring in the Wi-Fi coverage. But not only that, they're looking to experience the game in more social ways. They don't want to sit in their seat anymore. They don't just want to sit. We have clients that say, I want to design a stadium so that people will sit in their seat. And we say, they're not going to sit in their seat. So that's the first thing you have to understand, is that they want to be able to move around. They want to be able to be more social. And also, you know, we're dealing with the great television production. I mean, think about all the things that every broadcaster has done to make staying at home and watching a game on television the most exciting thing you can think of. You know, with the convenience of your refrigerator. You know, so, and you don't have to deal with parking and traffic and all the other things, because as we survey people, and we do this a lot, we're really into data collection. We're looking for data drives almost everything that we do as designers. And as we survey and we find out, some of the things that get the highest negative responses are just the traffic getting from your house to the venue and getting back. Once they get to the stadium, they get to the arena, generally they're fairly happy with things, and if they're not, then they'll tell you what that is as well. But you know, that's a big part of that experience. So we're seeing across the country a huge decline in the attendance of live events. Now, still, there's nothing that replaces a live event. You know, a lot of people can always think about when they were at this game or were at that game, and what happened and who they were with and what a special memory it was, or with your, if you were a young kid with your grandpa, or your grandpa with your grandson or your granddaughter, whatever that is. I mean, those were experiences get made at these events, and we understand that, you know, from the live event. But in that regard, the way people want to consume it, the way they want to watch it, people used to be happy to be a spectator at the game, and now people want to participate. You know, they want to tweet. They want to see their photograph on the video board. They want to see their tweet. They want to become a part. They want to get on the field. They want to, you know, now we've got field clubs and different types of amenities that allow people to get up close. I mean, the Journal wouldn't let anybody get close. and yet, like, now that's the experience. I mean, people are looking for new and unique ways to kind of be at the game. And so, you know, those are the things that we're constantly trying to study and to understand, because as demographics change and as each year goes by, people want to consume the event in a different way. And our job is to understand how they want to consume the event, so that when we get asked by an athletic director or a professional sports team owner and says, you know, what do we want to do when we look to the future, we can be as up to date as possible on this is where we see the trends going, and this is why we're doing the things we're doing.
Are there particular venues that Populus has worked on where you feel like you've really gotten it right, that you're particularly proud of?
Well, for the company, I got to say all of them, right? Sure. But, well, you know what? I think for us, it started with Camden Yards back in the late
first full-time new ballpark.
Right. I mean, it was, you know, we could go back and talk about 100 years of sports facilities and how they were neighborhood buildings, and then how they became these big concrete kind of massive structures, and then how they became these multi-purpose venues that were very introverted and didn't like have any relationship to the city or the context they were in. And it just so happened that, you know, with Camden Yards in Baltimore, it was kind of the first ballpark that kind of turned itself inside out again. It kind of went extroverted. It reached into the city. It created a destination. It integrated into what the Inner Harbor had, and it began a catalyst of redevelopment. And so that was highly successful. We did it again at Coors Field in Denver. If you look at the statistics of what the area was in that part of Denver and what it's like now, you know, it's amazing the redevelopment that's going on in that part of the city. It keeps growing and growing and growing here 20-some years later. I can think about what we just did with the Atlanta Braves and the new ballpark in Atlanta and the whole battery. I mean, it was part of an 87-acre district that has all this mixed use and retail entertainment that's adjacent to the ballpark. And, you know, in our college world, you know, I think about what we did on our new stadiums when we did the TCF Bank Stadium at the University of Minnesota, what we did at Baylor with their new stadium a few years ago, and then what we just did at Colorado State, their new stadium opened this year. You know, we brought football back to campus, and all of a sudden we created this heartbeat of where everybody comes back to campus. There's alumni that have been coming back for years that would go to the stadium and never set foot on campus. And all of a sudden, all the different colleges within the university get a chance to kind of capture those alumni who are now actually back on campus, back on their old grounds, you know, and it gives this renewed spirit to what, you know, the way people come and engage. So I think it's one of the key things that we try to do as architects is create a destination and a place that the experience that people have there, they remember, they want to keep coming back.
Is that part of the architectural mission in terms of sort of creating a sense of community with buildings, so that I just think the Camden Yards example is fantastic from that period because of everything it sparked.
You know, and we also try to, I mean, I know that when we worked with Marv Evans here from the Office of Physical Plan, and we went through the master plan, and Sandy's in the audience as well, but one of the things that we said through that whole study was, you know, making sure that we look at the places in between the buildings, because they're just as important as the buildings themselves. And so the experience that people have doesn't just happen once they come into the stadium or the arena. It actually happens when they, you know, step inside of the building, or they step on campus, you know, and so how do you make that as great as you can make it?
You bring up the 20-year plan. Can you tell us anything about why it's important to have such a master plan in the first place, and then some of the things you saw when you looked at Penn State's facilities and campus and future that really stood out to you?
Yeah, I spent almost the entire 25 years that I've been at Populus in collegiate athletics, and I've been to a lot of campuses, and you know, they're just wonderful, and obviously, you know, I mean, being a student athlete and coming up in that world, I mean, I love sports, and I love collegiate athletics. Both of my children were college athletes, and so, but one of the things I like so much about it is the sense of stewardship that exists within collegiate athletics. You know, the stuff that you read in the paper and the stuff that you see on TV always tends to highlight, you know, maybe some negative thing that happened somewhere. But what they don't talk about are the thousands and thousands of things that athletic administrators do to make student athletes better young men and women, and to create the best environments possible when alumni and fans come back to campus to have these great events. And so I love that aspect of college athletics. Well, for those athletic directors and administrators who are really trying to establish a vision and kind of seek a course that improves that situation for student athletes and improves that situation for spectators and alumni when they come back to campus, then they set out to master plan. They set out to create a vision. They set out to be deliberate and intentional about what people do whenever they come to campus, because, you know, once again, you think about how, you know, a lot of the facilities are funded by people who donate money. You know, resources are challenging. You know, you're trying to be the best steward of every dollar that comes to your department or your college, whether you're, you know, the dean of a college or the athletic director. And so, you know, when you set a plan and a vision, it shows that you're being fiscally responsible. It shows that you're thinking about the future. It shows that you're thinking about your staff, your coaches, your student athletes, you know, your whole department and how we grow it and make it the best we can make it, and make it authentic to the place where you are. And so, I mean, I'm proud of our institution for what they did, and I'm proud for the work that we did. I mean, I've never been a part of a master plan that looked at 31 sports. I mean, most colleges don't even have 31 sports, you know? And so we looked at every single sport. We looked at every single aspect of the athletic department. We you know, even challenged to say, let's look outside of athletics. Let's look at areas within the university that are areas of excellence, that this university is doing great things, and what partnerships or collaborations might be able to occur, you know, in the future with that. Let's look outside the university, and Sandy was willing to do that. And I'll tell you what, I think it was a fantastic plan. You know, we tried to build consensus with it, you know, and so I'm proud of the work that we did as a company, and now it's a matter of kind of just seeing how it starts to take shape.
I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit here, and once again, please, if you have questions, feel free to come on down. Populus has done some really interesting Olympic work, going to the grandest stage we really have in sports. In 2012, you did some really interesting things, designing the stadium in London to ensure that it wouldn't be the kind of white elephant that we've seen in other places like Rio, like Athens, like Beijing. And I'm wondering if you could tell people a little bit about that. And now you were just involved in the successful bid of Paris to get the games in 2024. So can you fill us in on that?
Yeah, so I'm partners with 10 other people, and with that we cover the globe as best we can as an architectural practice. We have 550 people on our staff in 14 offices around the world. It's the largest architecture firm that's dedicated just to designing sports facilities. That's all we do. We've expanded those services, and I'll get, people that know me, I'm going to get to the answer. I'm going to take a little journey, right?
We got 35 minutes.
And so we have people that specialize in different things. So I spend almost all my time in college athletics and the NFL, and then things that have to do with athlete training. And I've been able to do that all over the world. It's really cool. But then we have people who specialize in Major League Baseball stadiums. They specialize in NFL, or they specialize in different things. And so we have, one of my partners specializes in event planning, and that's World Cups, Olympic Games. And so the London Olympics was, and he's been a part of the last 12, 13, 14 Olympic Games. The London Olympics for us as a company was really special because since it was in London and we have a London office, that we were able to be a part of the master planning that went in to plan the games. We actually wrote the bid for the City of London that was successful in getting the games. Then they hired us to be their event overlay architect. So in the Olympic Games, there's about 110 venues total. And so you have to plan all the temporary facilities that go into taking any one building and make it something special for that game. And then when the games go away, you take all that stuff away and it has a secondary use, or it goes back to its previous use. So we were hired to do all that overlay planning for London. And then we also were hired to design the main stadium, the main track and field stadium, and the handball court, one of the other venues. So we actually had, but it was unique because we had an office right in London too, and we were able to kind of execute that in a way that nobody else really could. So highly successful. And the stadium was actually designed to be demountable. The lower bowl was all built cast in place concrete, but the upper bowl was all built in steel that was assembled in a way that it could be taken apart and moved somewhere else if that was the case. Well, they ended up refurbishing the building. West Ham, one of the Premier League teams, moved into it as a tenant. So we actually just did a big retrofit to expand the roof canopy and make it the home of West Ham now. So the building, and that whole area of London is now booming with redevelopment. And so that's what you want. You want the building to be a catalyst for future development. So whether it's a building here in the States or whether it's anywhere, you're looking for that thing to be a catalyst. So with Paris, we were successful in, they hired us to write their bid, just like Beijing did. When Beijing won the Summer Olympics, we actually wrote the bid for Beijing. And in that area, we weren't successful in winning any of the other additional work. They kept it in country and did different things. So with Paris, we wrote the bid, they were successful, they've been awarded the games, and now we're in the process of looking at what happens next. So now they take their bid committee, they turn it into a committee that will make the games actionable. And so now we wait and continue to see if there's anything else that we might be able to do as we move forward, whether it's the overlay work, or just get a chance to design one of the venues.
That's
fascinating. Yeah, it's really cool being a part of those games. I mean, our guys, we have guys in our office that were part of the Sochi Winter Olympics. In fact, we designed the main stadium in Sochi as well. But we had guys go back 10 or 12 years, and they would tell stories when they were just planning the games. They were walking the mountainsides trying to decide, okay, we're going to start the ski jump here, and then we're going to end the ski jump there. And then, we master planned where the venues went, and the sometimes people follow your master plan, but sometimes people don't. And they actually put every venue where we said to put it, you know? And now, what's happening after those games is a different situation, but you know, guys travel all over the world and do some remarkable things.
I'm just going to follow the thread for 1 second. Is there a particular kind of venue that's more challenging than others? I mean, I would imagine, you know, anything on a mountain or...
Yeah. You know, if you ask our guys that design arenas, they'll tell you it's the most complicated, you know, venue type to design. The guys that do baseball will tell you, oh, it's just the same thing, cut in 4 pieces. You just, you know, do a quad and you copy it over and you got a building. And that's not really what happens, but they'll say they do. Because, you know, baseball, you know, I think the more complicated ones are, you know, figure an NFL stadium, the field size is fixed. But there are certain venues where the sport doesn't have a field size that's fixed, and that gives you more flexibility to do unique things. I think some of the most complicated buildings we do are actually our Major League Baseball stadiums.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What about your own experience as a player? How does that inform your work when you come to design a football facility?
I'll give you a little bit of insight into. So I remember when we first, after I retired from the NFL, my first project was to come back to Penn State and design the Lash building, which was pretty cool. And then we started to look at Beaver Stadium, and people would say, oh, because you were a football player, I bet you know everything about the stadium. And I said, of course I do. I know everything about the stadium. Listen, all I ever saw was the service level, right? I was never on a concourse. I never sat in a bowl. I was never in a suite, you know, so like...
I'd send you out for hot dogs.
No, like, so I really didn't know everything about the stadium, but you know, luckily I became a part of a company that was immersed in the business of sport, immersed in, you know, the business of the NFL, and just like anything, you know, you kind of learn how people want to experience a game, and so I think that my career has helped me in collegiate athletics tremendously. As a student athlete, as someone who's been through those things, you understand what that life is like, you know, not just for the student athlete, but for the coach and for the administrator. And the better that we can understand the business of the people that we work for, then the better we'll be at actually designing the solutions that will make the most impact and be of most benefit to them. And I think that's why I kind of live in the world that I love. You know, I love being around football, and I love being around college athletics, and I do those things, and I feel like I can become I'm a good advisor in those areas, because that's. But if you ask me about, you know, a cricket stadium, I'd give you to my cricket partner.
You have to go to Steve Ross Evans to get
or you know, if you want to talk about Australian rules football, and you know, there's certain people hey, you got to talk to him, right? Because this is what he does every day. And that's another thing that's great about what we are, is that because everybody has their area of expertise and we help each other be as good as we can be. But I do believe it's helped. It does help. You know, initially, I know that my boss had hired me, you know, back when I was playing I was still in the NFL. So actually, my first 5 years with our company, I was still playing for the Indianapolis Colts. And every off season, I'd move back to Kansas City and I'd work for 4 months. And then when that was over, I'd go back to training camp. And while I was still playing in the league, they wouldn't take me to an NFL owners meeting. He just said, I don't think it's the right place for you to be, because the owners meetings are a place where we go and talk to the clients and about what they want to do. And right now we're working for 11 different NFL teams, doing different odds and ends projects with them, some big, some small. And he said, but I'm not taking you to those meetings until you're done playing. And when I finally retired, you know, it was difficult because they looked at me as a player, they looked at me as a professional. And so it's like being a rookie all over again, right? Or being a freshman all over again. You kind of had to take your lumps and have people tell you no a couple of times, but you know, you stay at it. And then eventually, 25 years later, you get people who actually call you. You don't have to call in. They call you and they say, hey, we've got this thing going on and we want to talk about how we change it. And so I think now it's been a real asset, because they look at me as, how do you differentiate yourself from everybody, right? Coach Paterno always used to say, the reason we wore blue and white uniforms is because everybody else had crazy colors. And he said, so when you're flipping through the television and you see Penn State, you know right away, you see white pants, you see a blue shirt, you don't see any names, and you know that's Penn State. And he said, so, he goes, if everybody else just wore one color, he said, we got the craziest uniforms of anybody. The analogy actually is, how do you distinguish yourself? I mean, there's a lot of great architects. I mean, there are fantastic architects everywhere. And I hate to admit it, but a lot of them don't work for us, right? They're just really good, they're really great at their job. But how do you stand out, right? So, you know, the one thing that NFL owners would know about me is if they know I'm the only architect. Well, I'm not actually an architect, so cut that out of the video, right? But I graduated degree in architectural engineering. I'm an engineer. I'm not an architect, and that's okay. But they look at me as somebody who's one of them, like you're one of us. And so I think sometimes that helps us when we get a chance to do work with people.
Are there things that NFL owners are trends in terms of what they're asking for, like everybody all of a sudden wants? I mean, you know, once upon a time it was club suites or that sort of thing.
Yeah, you know, I would say right now in the league, the push the last couple of years has been to upgrade their Wi-Fi systems, their DAS and Wi-Fi systems. So whenever you bring whatever your smartphone, whatever your device is, your mobile device, you have a way to kind of use it while you're there, and that continues to get better and better and better. A lot of the things are looking for more diversity in their premium products. You know, people aren't all wanting to buy the same type of suite or the same club seat, and so we're doing a lot more things with a lot of diversity. We're little by little, we're taking seats out here and there, we're putting in different types of products. One of the newest ones is even field clubs, like getting people on the field. You know, they did it in MetLife. Yeah. First one that we ever did that was ever done was we did it a renovation at the RCA Dome back in 1997. It was one of my first projects where we actually put two clubs in on the field underneath the lower bowl and gave the people in the club access to watch the players come out of the locker room and walk by. Well, now that's one of the biggest trends in the NFL. Everybody wants to have a field club. Everybody wants to have the team either walk through the club, like at Dallas, or walk by the club, like we did for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And so they're looking for ways to engage the fans, you know, with the players in more unique ways. And, you know, the game day experience is really important to the NFL. I mean, really important to, you know, again, anecdotally, I bet a third to 40% of the annual revenue that an NFL team generates comes from the stadium, you know, from ticket sales and premium seating and parking and concessions and sponsorships and all that kind of stuff. So that's really important to them.
Yeah, it's one of the few, I mean, it's an area where there's less revenue sharing, so the team can...
With their sponsorships, that's right.
Can do better.
That's right.
With that. Who's got a question up there? Come on down, I'm sorry.
Can I just shout from here?
Just shout
very
from
loud. Hi, Scott.
Hello, Kay.
One of the things that I'm concerned about, and I think other people think about, I want to know how that impacts the future, is security. With the times being what they are, whether it's retrofit, is someone within your organization, is that their sole purpose, or is that something that you contract out in the future for? Because I think it's only going to get worse before it gets better.
Yeah, we actually use, the answer is yes and no. So we, for a number of years, we had somebody in our office whose specialization is in stadium operations and security. Recently, they went off and created their own company, and so we still utilize them for almost every venue that we're a part of. I know that when the Department of Homeland Security came out with their best practices and their recommendations, certain teams and certain leagues follow those guidelines very directly, and others aren't quite as strong. I know that the NFL has made a big push, especially as a league, to make sure that all of their stadiums meet certain standards, and they get accreditation for having a certain standard of security. So it's just not, it's the entire system that is implemented throughout the stadium, not just, you know, every other game. So we understand a little bit more today than we did years ago about, you know, bomb blasts and what that blast radius is like, and so we set up certain perimeters at certain distances. I know some of the venues are very stringent about bag and article checks and wanding. Most of the NFL buildings have gone to magnometers that you have to walk through, the mags. Not every venue does that. I know a lot of colleges have no security whatsoever. You know, we do it here at Penn State. There's a clear bag policy. You know, all the NFL venues have gone to that. But I know there are still places where they don't wand. They don't check approach. But yeah, they just don't. They don't do it the way it's done here. And I would have to say, I think that Penn State's done a remarkable job of creating their security areas and looking at vehicles and making sure that they're doing the kind of the latest and greatest things for security. It's one of the biggest things that we're concerned about in any venue. You know, sometimes when you have space around a building, it's easier to establish perimeters, you know, and secure them. But when you're in cities and you don't have that opportunity, then you spend a lot of extra money in certain provisions to kind of make the building withstand blasts and things like that. So it's you know, yes, there are rules we follow. There are people that help educate us and all of our architects and help us to kind of implement things. And at the end of the day, it becomes the client who says, yes, I'll do that, and no, I won't. But at least we know how to bring those recommendations into the client to say this is kind of what the best practices are, both in the U.S. and around the world.
Just to follow on that, are there any regulations that you have to deal with? In other words, around here in our township, you have building permits. Are there any specific Homeland Security regulations on new stadiums?
No, not that I'm aware of. It's not like a code that you have to do what the code says. No, they become recommendations that they want people to follow.
Thank you.
I'm just gonna, before I get to you, this lady. Yep.
First of all, whoever designed the acoustics did a fabulous job. I think that when Iowa designed that children's hospital in conjunction with the stadium, it was like a wow moment for America. And how do you see architects combining with other communities to create more of that?
Could you repeat the question?
So no, yeah, repeat the question for me.
The question is basically, so Iowa, I think is where you're talking about, where
Yeah,
they had the children's hospital.
Yeah.
And this the big thing this year has been at the end of the first quarter, everybody waves to the kids in the window. And the question is about, do you see architects trying to combine community in very specific ways, you know, in the future that sort of pick up on this?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I wasn't even aware that they did. I mean, I've been up to Kinnick Stadium a few times, and I understand, you know, that the hospital's across the street, and I didn't even know that they did that. So that's actually really cool. You know, I can't think of an example at the moment of something that we're doing that's kind of similar to that. No, in terms of, you know, kind of building communities that way, but. No, I actually can't think of it. I can't think of an example like that, but that's actually really cool.
You were talking about earlier with Camden Yard and, you know, how that kind of exists as like I think you said beating heart kind of that downtown area. Is that something like when you guys are in a preliminary like planning phases for a stadium, is that something that you guys can push for to, you know, try and have it in you know, maybe a more downtown or a more, you know, population center that you think that, or is that more up to the owners and local governments? Yeah. And I'm sure that gets kind of complicated.
I would say that most of the time, when we're brought into a potential project, they don't know what the site's going to be. And so we'll do a site evaluation study and look at various opportunities that they might have, whether it's on campus or within the city. Sometimes they've already made the decision, the determination that the venue will go in this specific spot. And once you do that, then you're trying to figure out, okay, so what are the local assets and what are we trying to kind of integrate with, knowing that we have this one site. But whenever we do the broader evaluation, then absolutely, you know, we look for the best available sites, where sometimes it means acquiring land, sometimes it means having to displace businesses that already exist on that site because there may be a better use for that site or a different use that might be better for the long run of the city. So yes, we actually get to influence where the building goes and basically outline the pros and cons and the assets of if you do it here, here's what the benefits are, and here's what the potential is, and if you do it here, here's what that is. And you know, clearly there's all these different variables that go into that evaluation process, and we outline it for the client so they can make decisions.
Yeah. I guess like from my vantage point, just like mostly as a sports fan, it seems like a lot of the stadiums are trending towards like, you know, whether it's because they need more space for security or for parking, or like it seems like a lot of stadiums are moving out of cities in some cases, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
no, I wouldn't say that's the case. I wouldn't say that's the case at all. I mean, there's a little bit of a difference here in the United States when you know, we're looking at an NFL venue versus a Major League Baseball stadium or an MLS stadium or an arena, because you know, I know that most of the MLS buildings that we're doing right now are very urban buildings. I know that the baseball buildings that we're doing, the ballparks are, for the most part, you know, occasionally something like Atlanta where it was put off in the suburbs and then they created a district around it. But you look at what, you know, you look at Yankee Stadium, or you look at Coors Field, or you look at buildings like that, even down in Cincinnati and Philadelphia, the things we've done in the very urban places. So, you know, occasionally, because of parking requirements or the parking that's desired, it does move out a little bit. But I think that there seems to be, I would say, I think the trend is trying to integrate them into an urban district more than ever. Yeah, sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, sure.
You're a great example of the productive citizen athletes that Joe Paterno was famous for producing at this university. And I wonder if you'd talk a little bit about what it was like to be an architectural engineering student here at the same time you were playing for a national championship football team. Time management must have been an issue. What was your college experience like as a student, not just as an athlete?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I think those, because the AE program here is 5 years. In fact, I remember when I got recruited, we sat with Professor Kingsbury and told him that I wanted to be an architecture engineering student, and he said, well, you can't do that. And I remember thinking, you know, I'll tell him, I'll show him, I'll do this. Like, don't tell me what I can and can't do. And so I remember Coach Paterno talking to my mom and saying, classes come first, classes come first. Yeah, well, you know, I say they're pretty even, right? Classes and football were pretty even. So my experience was 8 o'clock class every semester all the time. You know, going straight through until it was time to head to practice in the falls. You know, and in the spring, you know, there were times when I'd have to take a class at, you know, kind of was at the same time that football practice was, and Coach would say, you know, he'd get upset with I was leaving practice or I couldn't make practice that day. He's like, you know, and I said, but you told my mom classes. I used that line as much as I could. So, you know, I would have to say I probably didn't have a whole lot of fun while I was at Penn State. I mean, yeah, I had a great time, but, you know, studying, there was a lot of studying, you know, there was thankfully the athletic department had wonderful opportunities for, you know, tutors that they provide. So, you know, because you'd get back about 8 o'clock at the end of the day and, you know, you had that kind of little bit of window, and we know, I've got a couple of classmates that are here, and I know they'd hang out in studio and they'd do things. You know, I never stepped foot in the studio. I just didn't have time to be in studio. So I didn't get a chance to kind of really know some of them the way other guys got together, knew each other, because I was at practice or doing those things. But and I never knew how I was going to use an architectural engineering degree. And the other interesting thing is, you know, so I got drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs after my 4th year. I still had another year of class to go. So moved to Kansas City and played ball that season. And then when the season was over, we moved back to Penn State. And at the time, my wife was pregnant, and so we had to schedule class. So neither one of us was in class at the same time because Matt was going to be born that March. So then the baby came, and then the next year we came back to school one more time in the off season with a toddler. You know, in fact, I was reminiscent of one of my buddies in the crowd because he had a little boy too, and they would run around together, and you know, it kind of made you look like you weren't the only guy at school with a baby, right? And so yeah, it took kind of that effort, and I remember having one more class to go, and it was just an elective, you know, and I took it through correspondence. They didn't have correspondence class anymore, right? Yeah. So you know, but I mean, I had to take that, and they mailed me my diploma. You know, it was like, I can't get back for graduation, I'm in season again. So, but at the end of the day, yeah, I could never have imagined not having that degree. I didn't know how I would use it, and it wasn't easy to do, but you know what the cool thing about Penn State is that Coach did, you know, even though he would yell at you when you had to miss practice, he wanted you to go out there. And you know, and I remember whenever we came back for his viewing, and I remember getting a hug from one of his daughters and said, "Oh, Joe was so proud of you. He always used to talk about you being an architect." And I honestly, it's surprised me, you know, because Joe's the kind of guy that whether you're 17 or you're 57, when he sees you, he would tell you about all the things you're not doing right. And he never, ever would tell you did a good job. And so when we got together for the reunion at the Pitt game, you know, a bunch of guys came back from the '82 team, and we were all talking, and I'd say, "So, did Joe ever tell you you did anything good?" "No." And then they'd say, "Did Joe ever tell you you ever did anything good?" And he'd like, "No." And you know, I mean, Joe never told you you did anything good because he always expected that you could do better. And you kind of take that with you in life, but I think that's the type of men that he, you know, that he helped groom, and I think that's one of the things that makes Penn State a special place. And all the student athletes here are just remarkable. My son came back and played lacrosse here, graduated about 10 years ago. And I tell you what, when I started meeting, you know, whether it was the field hockey players or the women's volleyball or the men's volleyball and the women's lacrosse and the soccer players, and you started meeting all these wonderful young men and women that, you know, I never had a chance to kind of meet because it seemed like it was football in class and football in class. And it was like, this is a remarkable institution. It really is. It's a special place. And it just got us back involved with things again, you know, because while I was in the NFL, I was kind of gone and separated. But that was the catalyst to kind of come back and start doing things. And so, yeah, really great, special place. No, every day wasn't really that much fun. But now you get to enjoy it, you know, get to enjoy it now. And so I love seeing what's happening within the department, and what I really love seeing too is that there's a center like this where, you know, there's collaboration occurring between these different entities at the university, and sometimes you say, well, what's the outcome? And you go, I don't really know what the outcome's going to be, right? But let's just put smart people together and let them start talking to each other, and you never know kind of what's going to happen.
Sure, it's already bearing some fruit. You have a question?
So as a designer, when you're designing a stadium, how do you make sure that affordability comes into play with tickets being expensive? How can you kind of work that out when you're designing a building or a stadium like this?
Yeah, so one of the things we'll do is we'll talk with the client about the type of different seating options that they want to provide for fans. And almost every single time, you know, yet they're going to be looking for ways to maximize revenue and generate revenue, and so they're going to talk about the variety of premium seating that they want to put in the building, but they all want to kind of think about how do you also create places for people who it may be they're just starting, you know, their professional career, or they're young adults with families or whatever, and so we'll talk about what do you want to do for families, what do you want to do for young people. Sometimes they try to create areas that have a very affordable ticket price that you do have a seat, and a lot of times, we're talking about a lot now about standing room, like standing room only areas where people just want to come into this building. You know, we're talking about designing less seats in stadiums, and actually providing more areas for people to be in the building, and they don't actually want to go sit down. And those of us, some of us who are, you know, baby boomers, we'd say, I want to see it. Like, I want to come in, I want to know where I'm going to sit down, and I want to see it. And I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people that don't actually care about sitting down. And they just want to be in the building, they want to be around the atmosphere. I mean, the game can be going on right here, and they're happy to be right here watching the TV. So you're like, the game is right there. But they're watching the game on TV. And so I think I've gotten to the point where it's like, I'm not going to try to change them. I want to understand why that's why they want to do. Sure. And then say, well, how do I make this experience better for you so that you bring your friends and keep coming back? So, I mean, we did that at Colorado State, we did that at Baylor. You know, I'm thinking about some of the collegiate buildings that we've done recently, brand new buildings, where we've built in room for thousands of stadium room people to just come into the building and be a part of it and go wherever there's a TV and hang out. So, yeah, most of our clients are looking for ways to, unfortunately, we don't have anything to do with what that ticket price actually is, but we can design where it is and what kind of experience you have when you're in it.
You're definitely seeing that with some of the MLB buildings as well.
Oh, yeah, there's been, little by little, they're taking areas that are soft, let's just say soft sales, they're not completely sold out. They're looking for ways to turn it into a more interesting experience, something that's unique, that gives fans something that they wouldn't get somewhere else, and gets them off the couch and gets them home, gets them away from their house.
John Powell will have something sage to say, I'm sure.
I do. Scott, I just want to thank you very much for coming. I think you can see the interest on a Friday before a home football game, before Thanksgiving, all the people that came out. And I want to underscore what you said about involving other aspects of the university in the plan that you did. Because Scott was good enough to come to my class. I teach a class in sports marketing. And Scott was good enough to come to class twice, and of course he lives in Kansas City, and work with the students on this plan, get their input. And the students in my class actually worked on a project where they gave their input about the kind of things that they will want to see that is changes in Beaver Stadium. So that was a great example, I think, of how you involved other parts of the campus in the plan.
Oh, I use that as an example when we go to different athletic departments around the country and say, you know what, we asked them, we wanted to speak with John in the College of Business, and I remember somebody said, what do you want to get out of the meeting? And I said, I don't know. I just think we should talk to him, right? And we did that with a bunch of different people. And then John suggested, well, you know, why don't you come to class? I said, you know, we can manipulate kind of what the curriculum is, and we could actually get the kids to do a class project. And we said, well, we just started to brainstorm, what would it be? And we said, how about if we ask the students what they want in an experience at Beaver Stadium, right? Best student section in the country, 21,000 of them. But, you know, how do you keep making it better? How do you keep it? Because, you know, they do tend to kind of wander out after halftime. Right? I mean, we all notice they all kind of wander out after halftime, unless it's, you know, with a big game. And so they surveyed themselves to find out, and 3 different teams came back and reported on what their surveys said. And it's remarkable. We actually we just used it at Kansas State. We interviewed for a project at Kansas State Wednesday afternoon. And we used the slide that we created from the study that John's students said. And it's remarkable. Just give me a discount on chicken fingers in the fourth quarter. I think we can do that.
The other thing was serve beer.
They did say
I don't think we can do that.
They did say serve beer. And
serve beer.
And they actually gave you some really sound reasons why it would be a good idea. Very resourceful.
But we're still not going to do it.
China sells itself.
Right.
But just 2 real quick questions. First of all, I'm curious, other than Beaver Stadium, what stadium, of all the campuses that you go to around the country, what stadium do you like best, and why? And then the other thing I wanted to ask you is, what would you recommend for a student that wants to get into? We have a lot of students that just love sports, and they also would like to make that part of their career somehow. What would you recommend that a young student do who might want to get into sports architecture, some of the kind of things that you do?
Yeah, okay, so the first question was, you know, kind of what's my favorite venue in college athletics? Well, clearly because of my experience, it's Beaver Stadium. It's such a unique place. Not only just the number of people, but it's the entire commitment to the atmosphere. I mean, look at the tailgate. I love bringing anybody to Beaver Stadium. I just love it, especially from Kansas City, especially Jayhawks, right? All they want to do is talk about their basketball team because they won't talk about their football team. So I brought different guys back over the years, and they just stand, you know, on the top of the stadium and look around, and they're in awe. They just can't imagine that there's a place that has this many people that tailgate this way, that the culture of what it is, and you know how they enjoy the game. That's really cool. You know, I tend to go to places where I've done work. You know, we did a lot of work in the stadium at Virginia Tech, and that's a really fun place to watch a football game. You know, because yes, they tailgate, not to the extent that we do here, but they do have a great culture of tailgating. They sell these giant turkey legs everywhere. I mean, it's like Thanksgiving. They've got this vendors selling these giant turkey legs, and people are walking around. And their pregame ritual with the song that they sing, and the kids jumping up and down. And I mean, it's a really cool place to go watch a football game. But I love what we've done recently with some of the. It's hard to take, you know, to design a new stadium on a college campus and make it feel like it's been around and that people want to be there. It's easy to have a place with history and you do something with it and you kind of make it a little bit better and good. You didn't screw it up, right? But when you do a new building, that gets a little bit harder. So I'm really proud of what we've done at Minnesota and Baylor, and especially at Colorado State, because you know, when you see the president of the university and you see the trustees and you see the athletic director, you see these people with just big smiles on their faces. As they walk around the building, they just, one, they're not yelling at you, which is always good. And they're smiling because people are having such a great time of being on campus and being a part of the experience. That, you know, I tend to go to those buildings kind of before I go to those. In terms of like a career, almost everybody in our firm is an architect. You know, whether it's an interiors architect or whatever. So, you know, in terms of the design profession, yeah, most people are architects. Occasionally, you'll see somebody who isn't, but for the most part, they're architects. We have a really interesting young man who's going to start working with us, an intern with us. He's got a dual MBA, he's getting a dual MBA and his master's in architecture. And I think what we're going to see happen, just my opinion, is that I see us hiring people who won't always be architects. Because data collection and the study of what people want and understanding aspects of the business that isn't architecture, I think that's going to become more prevalent in order for us to design smarter buildings or better buildings. And so, not that there'll be a lot of them, but I do see opportunities for people with business degrees or marketing degrees. Or actually could be, you know, or a sociologist, or I see us kind of moving because the data collection has really become, we have a partnership with Nielsen. Everybody knows who Nielsen is, right? Because they're the authors of almost every survey that happens everywhere. And so they have a sport division, and we have a strategic partnership with them where we actually ask them to say, ask these questions. And then they go out and ask questions about sporting events. And then sometimes we can do it just, we want to know what's going on in the country, or we might do it specifically to, okay, there's going to be a project at Penn State, let's say it's going to be about the Bryce Jordan Center. So we want to go ask Nielsen, go ask these questions of the people in central Pennsylvania and Pittsburgh and Philadelphia. Why do you come to this event? What's good or bad about it? What would you want to change? Why don't you come to the event? And through that information, we can then come back and say, well, you know what, if you're going to renovate Bryce Jordan Center, there's some things that people say they want to have, and here's why they don't come. And anyway, so we started to do that with different clients. So I think that there could be opportunities in the future for students that don't have, aren't necessarily. Yes.
Scott, thank you. And I want to echo John's sentiments, and I think we set a high standard going forward more football Fridays for next year. You mentioned technology, and as part of this consortium, in fact, I've had an opportunity to meet with a computer science engineer professor in the spring, and he mentioned about 3D glasses possibly coming to stadiums where you can put on the glasses, you can actually follow the players, and it would say, give their name and their number, and you can kind of follow them. Given that you're talked about Wi-Fi and current technology, have you talked about, or do you have people within your group that look into forward technology such as 3D and other things that we can't envision now?
Yeah.
But what would the future of the stadium look like with the newer technologies coming on board?
So I would say the two maybe most prominent things that we talk about. First is virtual reality. You know, it is that opportunity to kind of give somebody who's not in the stadium an opportunity to feel like they actually are in the stadium. And I know that basketball and hockey have kind of been working with it a little bit, but it hasn't been really that prevalent in football yet. The other thing is augmented reality. You know, we do believe there'll be a day, probably when driverless cars come and pick us up, right, and take us to the stadium, which will probably be happening here soon, sooner than we all believe it would happen. But we do believe there'll be a day when, whether you're wearing, you know, a pair of Google glasses or something that isn't even invented yet, that yes, while you're kind of watching the game, you're getting various statistics that you can call up on. It's no different than the first down line. It's just how do you bring that to the individual person when they're in venue, that when they put their glasses on or whatever, then they can see other information, how fast the guy's running, or what his heartbeat is, or things like that, velocities and trajectories and things. So we think that we think there's interest in that kind of information. We also know that when you start giving out that information, that not every team or athletic trainer wants to give out what somebody's heart rate is or how fast he's running or various things. But we do see sports fans consuming that type of information. And so I think that we're going to have a day when augmented reality will become a bigger part of an in-stadium experience for people through something that either is invented today, like Google Glasses, or through something that hasn't been created yet. Yeah.
Belichick doesn't want us to know that Tom Brady's pulse is 3.
Yeah, exactly.
Let me just, we're at the hour mark, so.
15 more minutes.
Oh, we have 15 more minutes. Oh, well,
It was just advertised till 5:15. We're going to get you at it at 5:15.
okay.
Thanks again for coming. That was Andy Wiesner, by the way, is a professor of statistics. Just to show the interdisciplinary, he and John Affleck have worked on projects to teach sports journalists more about statistics so they can be better either broadcast communicators or print journalists or web, or whatever you call it today. Just another example of the interdisciplinary. And for those of you who didn't know, John Powell, who's actually responsible for getting Scott here, is the director of sports business program at Smeal College, and is really effective at integrating this in. On the business and then equity side, India, I do follow cricket, and India is the biggest cricket nation and is characterized by vast inequalities of wealth. And so their stadia process is to have incredibly expensive, high-end experiences for the wealthy. But then, since a lot of people can afford about a ticket that's worth about $1, to then have massive amounts of people around. My question is sort of inspired by the Paterno Fellow, Professor of English, Jack Selzer. I don't know if Jack made it here, but he asked me to ask the question, is this the sort of guide in the future that stadia will consist of enough cheap seats so that the people watching on TV can think there's a lot of excitement at the game, and then just incredibly expensive boxes for the wealthy, and that creates a sort of bimodal experience? Do you think that is the sort of future of where this is going? Because, putting aside college sports, a pros team might well be better off by having 20,000 incredibly expensive tickets, and then you just have, but you get a huge crowd because they're only like $5 or something like that. Do you see that as part of the future?
You know, what I would say to that is that I don't see there being that sizable dichotomy in the building. What we're seeing is we're seeing more variety. So we're seeing like this shredding that occurs where there's lots of different things, and as we, with each kind of 5-year period that we work, we see more of that occurring. I don't see it occurring kind of all the way to the degree, because I think our culture and our country is different than India. I think that's something that is consistent with their culture, you know, and I think that our sports buildings, whether we want them to be or not, tend to be a little, you know, kind of microcosm of the culture of the country as well. As much as we can try to change that, that hasn't really happened yet. So I do see more variety occurring. I see stadiums that are going to be having many less seats, but still having as many people in them, but just not sitting in seats. In fact, we, you know, with the new MLS building that we just did in Orlando, we created one of the first standing room only sections that there is in a stadium, in a modern stadium. It's only 3,100 seats or 4,000 seats, but it was designed with rails for everybody to stand. Again, supporter section behind the end line, you know, but designed as a standing room area specifically, you know, and I know that that's happened in another MLS building, and I think we're going to start to see more of that. So I don't think it would be quite the way that you describe it, at least not in the United States, but I do see there kind of continuing to be so many different types of experiences kind of in the building, more so than there used to be.
We're going to wrap up with this one right here who has her hand raised, and then I'm going to ask a final question.
Since you're speaking of adding more standing room and less seating, which will determine a population growth within a stadium, how does that affect your circulation and how people will move throughout that stadium to even get out or get in or even walk around their experience?
Yeah, I would say that one of the keys to this, when leagues survey their fans, you know, and we are sometimes able to see that information that comes back. One of the things that comes up a lot is kind of safety, security, and just walking concourses. Because the more congested people feel, the less safe they feel in the stadium. And so, regardless of that there's a seat or there's just a person in the building, you know, when we're designing buildings, we're designing them based on providing each person a certain amount of area to move. So it's based on the number of people in the building. All the exiting in the building is designed by the number of people that the building would hold, not the number of seats. The concourses, and again, they're not code dictated, you know, so sometimes you'll see places that have been around a long time, like Beaver Stadium, that we wish there were wider concourses, we wish there were more area for people to move because it gets really congested at times. In newer buildings, we're able to plan the width of those concourses in better ways, so it's much easier for people to kind of move around the building. So regardless of the number of seats in the building, there'd always be enough circulation to handle the capacity of the building. So thanks again to everybody for coming out. And since it is Senior Day tomorrow, I thought I'd ask you sort of a two-part question. One is, do you have any specific Senior Day memories or particular memories from Beaver Stadium as a player that really stand out to you when you think about being a player in Beaver Stadium? Where do you go in your mind? And then the other thing is, in your current role, let's think about Senior Day 10 years from now. Can you want to predict for us what that experience is going to be like when we walk into the stadium, besides the recent 2026 national championship? Right. Okay, so I've been hitting the head a few times. So what was the first question?
First one is...
oh yeah, experiences. I remember when I got knocked out once. Whenever anybody asks me about an experience, I naturally go to the '82 season when we played Nebraska here. I mean, it was just, in that year of kind of the way that season went, at that time, and So yeah, I mean, you think about the last drive, you think about, you know, McCluskey's catch and what Kurt Bowman's catch and different things. So, you know, you naturally go to that game because that game kind of gave us a springboard to kind of do what we did for the rest of the season. And then I always, you know, you think, you remember games not like as big things, but you remember a play here, you remember a play there. You know, I remember not at Beaver Stadium, but at the Sugar Bowl, where it was, I was the guy who took the signal from the sideline and had to tell people what the play was, and then if they came out in a different formation or whatever, you make an adjustment, then I had to make the adjustment, communicate it. Well, it was so loud that I don't know if you've ever been in this situation. It was so loud I couldn't hear myself. Like I knew I was saying something, but I couldn't hear what I was saying, let alone so nobody could hear what I was saying, you know? And so I remember going to sidelines and talking to guys about a couple of signals and things that we could use because it was so loud in the building that you just couldn't even hear what you were saying. You know? That was pretty unique. But you know, my Beaver Stadium, I naturally come back to that game because it was such a pivotal thing that kind of took us someplace. What's Beaver Stadium going to be like in 10 years? I see drones flying around the stadium. You know how right now they've got that camera that has the wires on it? Marv, that's going to be gone, okay? There won't be wires. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that technology was going to change and there'll be drones and I don't know what they'll be doing, but they'll be flying around. I do think there'll be, somehow we're going to have to figure out how we service people who want to use Uber and driverless cars and that kind of stuff, because yeah, there's always going to be people that tailgate, but there's going to be people that don't. Right now, you know, it's becoming a bigger and bigger part of new buildings that we develop. You know, how do we have those pick up and drop off lanes and stuff for people who are just ride share type stuff? You know, there may be a renovation, actually, there may not be. Who knows what happens over the next 10 years, but, and I know I'll get crucified for saying this, but I think there's going to be less people in the building. I just don't know that 110,000 is sustainable for a long, long period of time. Now, that may mean there's less seats, but I think we would want to still figure out a way how to get them, if they want to come to the building, how do we get them in the building? So like we talked about, less seats in the stadium, but more areas for people to congregate and see the field. They can be a part of the action. And right now, you know, most of the people, when you're not in your seat, you can't really see the field unless you're in the corners and there's little small little areas. So I think there's a way to kind of create more elevated decks and things where people can see in and see the field, but not like being in the seats. So I still think the team will run out of the same tunnel. I don't think that's going to change. I remember asking some of my players, so do you think it'd be a big deal if we moved the locker room to another location and we didn't run out of that tunnel? And yeah, no, nobody. There weren't a lot of people that were really interested in seeing that. Because that's a tradition. You know, I still think the buses are going to pull up to the south side. I still think they're going to drive through the tailgating. And I still think they're going to walk through the fence. Like, there's certain things that's not going to change. That's part of the tradition of the stadium. But I think once you get in the building, hopefully we'll have discounted chicken fingers for the students. We should be all set.
Thank you all so much for attending. For those of you who have friends who weren't able to join us here, this is going to be posted in about the holidays, but in about a week or so, we're going to have a link up on centerforsports.psu.edu. Thanks largely to Steve Samsel, who's the gentleman behind the camera here, but he is not just the cameraman, he is a vital part of Belisario's communication team and is a true strategic advisor to our Center for Sports. For those of you who are interested, I hope by our second Football Friday we'll have some convenient web or tweet or something. But for now, you'll have to do it low tech, which is to email me at sfr10@psu.edu. If any of you are interested in the Center for Sports, learning more about it, learning how you can participate, learning about our events, we're going to hope to increase our streaming capacity. that would just be great as well. Thank you again for attending, and particular thanks to Scott Radecic for kicking this off. And have a great weekend.